Okay, thank you everyone. I hope you all had a good coffee break and welcome back. So as you can see, this episode is called Kevin's Angels, right? So we have women power here, so let's make the most of it. And as Carla pointed out, and Neha also pointed out, that women are good at conflicts management. So we will have lots of wisdom on this panel. So what I'd like to do is, rather than me rabbiting off a sheet, I'd like each of our panelists to introduce themselves because they can do it better than I could possibly do. So why don't we go from right to left, and then we will go one by one. We'll start. Okay.
So this is one of the most collaborative panels that I have seen so far. Hi everyone, I'm Anu, and I'm a psychologist and coach with 25 years of integrated experience with the corporate world as well. And it's an honor to be here.
Thank you, Anu, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Carla Villanueva Manas. I'm from the Philippines. I'm an ICF PCC coach. I'm also a facilitator and a trainer for Center for Executive Coaching, and I head Coaching for Exponential Leadership, where we train and coach leaders and coaches to be able to empower other leaders as well. And I'm glad to meet all of you.
That's wonderful. Oh, thank God. So one thing that everyone doesn't know about me is that I'm also a accredited mediator. So I do mediation in Singapore. The accreditation is with the Singapore Mediation Centre as well as the Singapore International Mediation Institute.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Neha Jalan, and just like Anu, I'm a psychologist and a global leadership coach. And what I really like is people watching. So I'm watching everybody here.
So good evening, everyone. I'm Anshul Verma. I am a Strathclyde graduate, business school graduate. And I have worked about 25 years in the corporate world. I have had the first part of my stint in business. I've handled a P&L account and then moved into learning development talent OD leader. So my last 2-3 stints with Lenovo as an Asia Pac leader and also with Thermo Fisher Scientific as their talent and OD and learning leader has been absolutely fruitful. And I'm also an accredited ICF coach. And of course, even in assessments and surveys, I have my accreditations. I think what I most like is very early in life, when I made the transition from business to talent, I used to say my personal mission statement is, so I was offered with Human Dynamic the MD role of India. And I said, no, I think I don't enjoy being a CEO so much rather than shaping CEOs of tomorrow. And that's when I moved to Thermo Fisher. And of course, my CEO was shocked. But I'm proud to say that today I am a co-founder of an organizational consulting, business consulting firm, where I aim to reinvent business. So thank you. That's me.
Thank you. Okay, so now that you've been introduced to our panelists, I'm going to start the session off on a positive note because conflict has this negative connotation around it. And as we all know, we are more productive and more energized when we start off on a positive note. So I'm going to go around our panelists, and this time we'll go from left to right, just so that we're fair. And we're going to start off with a question: where can conflicts be positive in a workplace?
So I think I would really like to say conflict is always positive because it's just a mere disagreement on a table. And a disagreement can only be over ideas. It can be over the way we do things, that is processes, how we achieve something on a table. And I think those are some of the areas which might come from generational clashes, or it might come from personality types, and many other things. But overall, I don't think it is intended to produce anger and drama. I think it turns out to be like that most of the times, but it's just supposed to be a simple disagreement over what we want to do, how we want to do, and what does success look like. So I think that's what I've seen in my career.
Thank you. Neha?
So just building on what Anshul said, so conflict is basically a disagreement between two ideas, two people, two ideologies. And I think what it does, it forces people to think of the third option. So it's like option A, option B, both are not working. And it's actually, I would say, a great road to invention. And I want to kind of support this with an example. So I worked with the Times of India, and I was heading HR for a couple of departments. And I don't know if all of you have been through this bell curve drama, right? So you always have the business heads tell you, we will not kind of follow the bell curve. And in fact, that was a conflict. So what it did, one is we told the line managers, this is the monies we have. If you don't want to do the bell curve, you can distribute the money the way you like. So that actually kind of pushed them, no, actually bell curve is a good idea because you need to justify. And the second thing it did, the goal setting became a lot rigorous because then people wanted clarity as to the rewards that they were getting and why they were getting. So we actually implemented a very robust performance management system because of a conflict.
Terrific. That's really, really important because conflict is always about communication. And if we don't have the communication, then there is no understanding of people's needs and wants. And usually conflict arises because people want something, but is it really what they need? And that's the conversation to have. So handing it over to Carla.
Yes.
So what is something that is positive from conflict management in the workplace?
I think it depends on the perspective. Conflict can be bad depending on how you look at it. It can also be used for growth. It can be used for innovation. It can be used for a way to find a third option, has been said. It can be used to be able to boost productivity growth and open up communication. If the parties are able to see it from a point of view of finding better solutions, then there will be alternatives. But if people are stuck in focusing on the disagreements, on what they don't have anything in common, then it will become a point of challenge. And I think the opportunity there is to be able to shift that mindset to see what is common in the objective, how can there be a shared vision and shared perspective so that it's a win-win for both and all parties.
That's wonderful. And I really love the statement about creativity and innovation because a lot of that actually comes out from debates and conversations. So that's really good.
It's really the birth. Conflict it gives birth to innovation and growth. And if we look at conflict as not negative, as an opportunity always to be able to drive, inventions, new things, discoveries, and everything, then it becomes something that we welcome in the workplace.
Fantastic. Anu, what's something that's positive from your perspective in the workplace from conflict?
So I think what we've heard so far is what happens before the conflict really emerges. And I can share an example of a merger that I worked with. We had a Japanese firm merging with an American firm. And even before the leaders got together, we knew there was a conflict in the making because the leadership styles, the culture, the communication approach was so different in both the countries. So what the leaders did was, even before we started the discussion around, this can be conflicting, they decided, let's call it conflict. And when we approach the teams and the leaders especially, let's ask them what else is possible once you've tabled all the conflicts that you perceive will come up. And so instead of that becoming conflict, it became conflict. And let's look beyond that. What else is possible? Which took them from before to during. And that was a very positive approach to take because everybody was preempting trouble with the merger.
Yes, it's always important to make sure that we have a view in terms of what's coming rather than what's happened before. Because we can't change the past, we can only move forward. And as coaches, that's part of our job. Terrific, thank you ladies. So let's have a look at a really, really important thing, especially the role of leaders. So what roles do leaders play in resolving conflict. Who'd like to take that one? Yeah, we can.
So leaders can play very different roles. One is from the point of power and authority, to evaluate, as you rightly said, Kevin, what are the wants and what are the needs, and do an absolute fine job of resource allocation, not basis anything else but what is good for the project or what's good for the organization as a whole to meet the goals and objectives. So the idea is not just because Mr. X wants it or Miss X, but the idea is from a place of power and authority, am I conscientious about how I use the power and authority? The second role that leaders play is there are different personalities and also generational clashes. So how do we build that culture of working together to be able to build that team cohesiveness where the best out of each comes out and you don't feel excluded? Some of the things are, some of the rules or some of the way we do things is not blurred for people who are working on things. So I think this whole thing between remote working and working, so hybrid working as we call it, has created some part that, this exclusion, teams not feeling close enough to each other, or that cohesiveness. The second thing could be some things are very blurred. I don't really know, can I get this resource or not? So some of these policies, regulations are very blurred. So that's how I think that whole collaboration starts missing. So how do you build collaboration in the midst of hybrid or remote working and ensure that doesn't widens the gap, the communication gap so much that people are in a Cold War or a silent conflict?
Terrific. And I think that's so important, that generational gap, that power and authority. Like, leaders have a huge role to play to try and close those gaps. So thank you. Neha.
So I really like this quote by Martin Luther, which says, peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is actually the way you handle a conflict. And as leaders, I think the first and foremost role is the psychological safety. I would imagine some of you are coaches here, and in a coaching session, the first thing we would actually establish is the safety, the confidentiality. And I feel at the workplace, there's a lot spoken about psychological safety, but I don't know how much of it is implemented. And a simple definition of psychological safety is when you can speak your mind freely without the fear of a negative consequence. So for leaders, I think the first role is to create the psychological safety. And the second is to be a little bit proactive, not wait for the conflict to arise, but actually address it beforehand. For example, I feel any change, whether it's a change in the organization, change in leadership, policy, it is a good bedrock for conflicts to happen. And if a leader is able to communicate fairly, transparently, early on, I think a lot of conflicts can be taken care of.
Thank you. That psychological safety is really important, because if people don't feel safe, they're not going to speak their truth. So their needs are not going to be catered for. So that's a really good point. Thank you, Neha. Carla.
So building up on what has been said, I think you've covered a lot. And I think for me, one of the most important roles that the leader can play in the organization to manage conflict is really to walk the talk. It depends on how they look at conflict. Is conflict something that they shy away from, or do they invite it? Is it something that's welcome in the organization? Do they find that they can channel the conflict into something that's creative to build innovation and growth? Or is it something that they feel scared of? If the leader is able to model that conflict is good, and so there's creative tension that can be that can be channeled into something good, then the people will follow. At the same time, as has been said, the psychological safety is very important. If people can speak up, even if there are differences, as long as these differences are said in a respectful way, in a way that supports the larger goals of the organization, and it becomes good. Of course, also, it's important to manage the conflict before it even happens. Like, how do you look at conflict? Is it a conflict? It's just disagreement. It's not labeled as conflict. Because when you label it as conflict, you already say that it's negative. It has a negative connotation. But if it's just a difference in opinion, a difference in perspective, so our words, the way that we label it, matters. So it's really the perspective of the leader and how they walk the talk and how they even look at conflict and define it from the very beginning.
I love that. And it's all about communication, walking the talk, role modeling, as well as making clear what it is that we need. So that's terrific. Anu.
So I think I'll extend a bit around what we've been referring to as psychological safety. And when it comes to the leaders, being vulnerable is one of the things that really opens up the space. So if the leader is saying, you know, well, yeah, there is a conflict and I really don't know what's happening in this flux here, that sets the momentum for people to be seen and heard without getting judged. And that kind of psychological safety takes care of conflict to a large extent. And once that starts to happen, then it's for the leaders to open up all forums for discussion, invite people to come in and share what they have, because some of the best ideas are probably sitting at the bottom of the rung and they're not really being seen or heard. One of the things that I was part of as an intervention in an organization that was facing a major conflict was that communication up and down was not happening very well. So the intervention that was created was to first of all have strategy top down and have the execution communication happening bottom up. So the term that was coined was collaboratively C, S for strategy, E for execution, and then share experiences up, down, and across. So that kind of an intervention helped resolve a lot of issues even before they came up, because communication and dialogue took care of a lot of that. So I think that's the role leaders do. Sometimes they take a back seat and they set the ball rolling, and then there are champions in the organization that take care of that communication without the leaders coming in from a more directive approach. And so that's how collaboration really happens.
I love that, collaboration without the directive approach, because the team members have to own all of that. So that's really good. Thank you, Anu.
Yeah, and I just want to share, as a team coach, sometimes we are coaching teams and they're not seeing eye to eye. So one of the questions, even for leaders, I find very useful, after a team meeting, before ending it, just asking the team, what have we not addressed yet in this meeting? So again, just creating that space for people to speak up, not waiting for it to become a conflict, just allowing people to share something that's not been addressed in the meeting. So at least it works wonders for me. Just that one question, it opens up people to have a dialogue.
And I totally agree with that. And you've raised a really, really important subject, Neha. So I'm going to diverge off the questions here because you raised a good topic, and a lot of us are coaches in here. So I'd like to ask the question, how helpful is team coaching in conflict management? Because ICF last year just came out officially with ACTC, the Advanced Certification in Team Coaching, and I know a lot of coaches are trying to explore and see whether that is something that they need to add to their toolkit. So is team coaching helpful in terms of conflict resolution within teams and within organizations? Maybe Neha, you might want to have an opinion on that first.
So I think sometimes even for coaching, we say the people who need it the most resist it the most. So even, I mean, for a coach to come in when there's conflict, I think there's a conflict that the coach is coming in, right, for starters. So it is a challenge for a coach to break the ice, create that safe space. But yeah, I think over a period of time, if the coaching progresses well, I think you we can land up with a very cohesive, well-working team. Because again, you're telling the team it's safe to talk. In fact, conflict is inevitable. Combat is probably something we can avoid, but conflict is inevitable. So yeah.
Anshul?
So maybe I can give you some live examples. In Thermo Fisher Scientific, I remember, we were an organization which had 40 acquisitions in about 10 years. So we were like this mini Australia, right? Where you kind of realize that all your channel partners you've acquired, your competition you've acquired, and they all come with their own values. They all come with their own way of working. And you can't expect them to change overnight. But because we are such a cash-rich and such a fast-moving company, and in those 7 years that I stayed with them, I was telling another group of people in Bangalore who I was facilitating, that I joined them as a Fortune 295. And when I left them after 7 years, they were nearly 120. So they knew what they were doing. They knew the way to do business. And did I see conflict? Yes, I saw it all over the place. Why? Because obviously the whole merger and the whole integration, and especially values integration and the way we do things integration, took a whole lot of time. How did we handle it? We realized that, so I think I used to be the talent L&OD leader and used to come on my kiddie that, listen, can you do? Most of the times, what I used was fun activities. I know that sounds weird, but I realized that even the leaders were not ready to talk about it. And that's where the problem was. So I know that this BU head and that BU head have same products because we've taken over our channel partner. And the channel partner does not want to give in their whole suite of services and products. The organization wants to continue with both. And now this whole segmentation of the market is not happening. So this one set of sales team is very disgruntled with the other one because sometimes you're going to the same clients, right? And now everything is Thermo Fisher, but the customer still knows the old brands, so our old identity brands of our channel partners. And I really remember that, there was no reason to be having a conflict because now we are one banner. But it took a lot of time for people to let go their old identity and embrace the new and say, okay, now we are part of Thermo Fisher. Can we go on calls together, sales calls together? Can we merge our forces? Can we have a combined business strategy rather than building our own? Now, it was common sense to do that because the customer is very confused what this organization is up to, especially in India. So I was responsible for India, and I thought there were so many, I designed so many, I would say, a day, 2-day kind of, that how do you get them together? I don't think I team coached them, but very subtly, the leaders needed more of the messaging. And the minute I think the leaders, even if one of them decided to make a shift of the way they will do things for the future, I saw that it was not so difficult to address the insecurities the teams were having.
Terrific. And I think that's cross-cultural challenges are always difficult.
Absolutely.
Yes. Anu, any thoughts about team coaching, supporting conflict management?
So I think there is a lot of emphasis, Kevin, on the goals and the purpose and the team externally coming together. One of the things that conflict does and team coaching addresses is what's happening internally. There are uncertainties, there are fears, there are ambiguities within that conflict brings up, which at an individual level is very difficult to process and cope with. And that's why team coaches come in and help address that uniqueness, which helps them either address their emotions internally or, some of the what we call cognitive distortions, which also helps them align with fully, holistically with the organizational purpose and goal. And once team coaching addresses that, everybody knows the goals, everybody knows what's the target like, and then they bring in their own uniqueness to execute that. And I think that's what team coaching does for everybody at first an individual level and then at a group and organizational level.
That's lovely. Thank you for that. Carla, any thoughts before we wrap?
Well, I totally agree with what Anu said. Team coaching is relevant if it's done right. It's valuable when it's done right. It's about connection. It's about the interior condition, the beingness of the people. When we allow everyone to honor that space and to respect that, then they connect on a human being to human being basis, and that's where a commonality is achieved. And then that's when conflict doesn't come up or conflict is managed right away, because there's a connection that just goes beyond goals. It's about how do we work together, how do we connect together to be able to accomplish more. And in that space of commonality, and in that space of unity, is the birth where they now have a shared vision, and conflict is now easily managed. So I love what Dr. Anu has said, really, really wonderful, like really about the being as the interior condition of the people. That's what we want to address more than the external. We want to do both, but really starting with the internal condition of the people and allowing that interior condition to connect to each other.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you to our panel, Anu, Anshul, Carla, and Neha. Hopefully, you've heard the wisdom of our ladies here, and they've provided you some insights, not only just in terms of where conflict begins, but how it can be positive for an organization and the value of team coaching in conflict management. So thank you, ladies. Thank you.